Good morning. I'm Wolfgang Schrader of the Blue Forest Bookshop in Market Street, George. Today we're in a wonderful conversation with the poet Archie Swanson, who has got 2 anthologies out and been published in quite a lot of different books. We are here because of the Make Your Mark library contest that happen every year. Last time we did it in the library, but this year, being a special COVID time, we're bringing it live to you from the Botanical Gardens. So Archie, which poems are you going to read us today? And then we'll have a short discussion afterwards.
Thanks, Wolfgang. I have 3 poems that I'll be reading. The poems are all poems about the bombing of innocent civilians. One of the poems, which I'll read first, has just a few months ago been awarded 2nd place in the Avbar Poetry Prize, and probably from about 15,000 poems.
Sure.
The poem is called My Guernica, and it's a poem about Picasso's famous painting of the bombing of the town of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War, in which German bombers came in and bombed an innocent population. It was the first time military might had been used against innocent civilians. And from that bombing incident, Picasso painted his famous painting, the Guernica. My Guernica. The bell of Santa Maria sounds the alarm. Junker and Heinkel bombers clatter in, deliver death at 4 p.m. In the street leading down the hill from Casa de Juntas, 50 lie dead, 42 more on Josephina's hospital floor. Arona Tugui, the priest, still clutches the child he saved, eyes glazed. A flock of sheep lie scattered in the marketplace. In flowering fields, the hearts of little children stain the ground, machine gunned down. And in cellars below, snow-white ash of the incinerated. Ox carts take the dead away. Bruegel's triumph of death has visited Guernica today. There are no calls from mothers here or stranglehold of fear, for all are dead. The fathers gone to war, just blind old men to see, and silent death to hear. What ghastly price this day has wrought, our consciences are burnt away. Gather the ashes, sweep up the souls, grind charcoal graphite fine in mortar bowls and mix a bitter paste, that I may paint my Guernica, grey on grey and white on black.
Sure.
The second poem that I'm going to read is a poem taken from a photograph that was taken by an Algeciras photographer in the town of Aleppo that was bombed by President Assad of Syria. And the photograph shows him seated in his absolutely shattered apartment. But he's taken out a wind-up gramophone record player and he's smoking his pipe, and in the midst of this destruction, he's listening to his favorite music. It's called Once Again. After Bashar al-Assad's bomb had shattered his apartment, the old man slowly took his tobacco pouch from the right-hand jacket pocket, filled his pipe, and lit it. As he drew the warm smoke into his lungs, it anesthetized his pain. He blew the dust from the battered gramophone, placed the Mohammedia vinyl on the turntable, and cranked the handle. As the song filled the broken room, a peace descended that he could not fathom. The children in the street below heard the sound, melancholy yet full of hope, for the old man in the upstairs apartment was playing his favorite music once again, and nothing had changed. The third poem that I'll be reading is a poem about my visit to London last year, and it was my last day in London, and I took a stroll down from the area of Regent Street, up near Carnaby Street actually, down Conduit Street, down to Green Park, and then through the park. And I come across the monument to the Bomber Command, who the Royal Air Force crew that flew in the Second World War. 55,000 of them died in the bombing raids. And they were directed by Field Marshal Bomber Harris. I had seen the monument going past it earlier in the week, and it sort of surprised me as I came upon it. I remembered I'd seen it from behind. Now, this monument was only erected a few years ago, so many years after the Second World War, because of the shame that somehow got attached to the bombing. And it took years for the monument to actually be erected. And so I'm just going to read the poem. The quote at the end is from William Blake's famous poem, which is sung as the song Jerusalem, which is the song, the poem is about an apocryphal account of that Jesus actually visited the British Isles. And the poem basically describes the British Isles as a sort of promised land, a green hill far away. So the poem is called Chariot of Fire. My last day in London. I've had my green curry at Rose's on Ganton Street, heard the final riff at my favourite blues bar, begun my meander down toward Green Park along Conduit Street, past the Coach and Horses pub, bookended between Barlow Place and Bruton Lane, down to Berkeley Square and the Bentley showroom there, to the burnished brass plaque of Lansdowne Club, until at last the Ritz. Crowds in for afternoon tea, clink of Dresden crockery. On past the entrance to Green Park Tube, to summer splashed across the page, mounted police watering horses, chattering children watching on, picnics in the park, the cyclists, the prams, the football played, the old man on the bench, conversations snatching by, vaulted plane trees lined against the sky, the beauty that is London in late July. And suddenly, I'm confronted by the bomber crew, gazing out on England's green and pleasant land, memorialized in bronze yet cast in shame, these men that went to war at 22. I think of Dresden dressed in powder snow, the clatter of my train, the Bahnhof with its massive dome, beneath a sky that turned to hell the day the bombers came. A photograph has always haunted me. A Dresden mother with her blackened pram, incinerated on the day the bombers came. The mounted Duke at Apsley House has turned away, and Air Chief Marshal Bomber Harris takes no blame. Bring me my bow of burning gold, bring me my arrows of desire, bring me my spear, O clouds unfold, bring me my chariot of fire. That's of course from William Blake's poem.
Yeah, wow, very strong poetry. Now with the bombing of civilians, as you as a poet, what grabs you first? The historical context? Because I know you reference a lot of photos and things that start original. Because in the poems you use everyday things. What grabs you the first? What gives you that emotional link to actually put those words on the paper?
Yes, look, I think, first of all, I didn't set out to write 3 poems about the bombing of civilians.
Yeah.
They happened, but they happened in a very short period, over a period of 1 year. I think the first attraction is the moment of impact when you're confronted by something. So, for example, being confronted by this memorial to the bomber crew, and remembering a time when I traveled from Berlin actually to Prague on the railway line down the River Elbe, which goes through Dresden. It suddenly took me to Dresden, and then Dresden was known because they had 3 nights of bombing in which so many incendiary bombs fell that even the oxygen of the air got burnt up and people just suffocated. Tens of thousands of people died. So that was that moment. The Algeciras photograph is quite well known, and if you Google it, you'll find it. The old man at Aleppo. And there again, one sees the moment, and you see this man in the midst of an absolute chaos. Somehow there's a semblance of order and calm, and
putting the gramophone on.
A return to what was before, and that's the thought behind that poem. The poem My Guernica, I actually, the way that was written, I visited the National Poetry Library in London, which is in the South Bank Centre near the National Theatre on the banks of the Thames. And I went to actually donate some collections to them. And they were setting up a exhibition of Picasso's famous Guernica. But this exhibition are all tapestries, one of which, incidentally, was made by a group of women in the Eastern Cape. And I got chatting to the woman who was curating it. And I said to her, I'm here for a couple of weeks. I'll write a poem and I'll send it to you. And that's what I did. So that it just almost piqued my sort of inquisitiveness, and I started researching it. And actually, that poem took a tremendous amount of research because I wanted to get the facts right. So that those are the origins of the spark of where the poems. You talk about the everyday scenes.
In it.
I think in any poem, to just simply deliver the intensity is an overkill. You need to have the juxtaposition, the contrast. And for instance, in the poem about the bomber command and that, I take the listener through a meander through London on the most lovely day, and suddenly I confront the listener with the horror of war. Of course, London was subjected to the most unbelievable bliss. I think 30,000 bombs were dropped in a period of about 8 or 9 months within the M25 confines of the city of London. So London had its horror too. But of course, bombing of civilians, whether it's German Luftwaffe bombing Spanish civilians, or whether it's
Syrian
bombing Syrians, or whether it's British and American pilots bombing German civilians, I guess for me there is no distinction. The common denominator is innocent civilians. And the horror of war, obviously.
Because that's one thing that hit me the most of it. Those are normal people, because with the Chariots of Fire, you have the image of the Dresden China, you have the pram that later takes you back to the pram of the Dresden women looking at the empty pram. So you have this, almost feel it's a perfect day, but the bombing can happen again.
Yes, so there are those links. So in the park in London, there's the woman pushing the pram, but then there's the incinerated pram. You picked that up, that I mentioned the Dresden, the Ritz Hotel is famous for its high tea, and everyone goes there, and then to the Palm Court restaurant. And I mentioned the Dresden, which is the finest china in Europe for 100 years, and that refinement, and then Dresden, I almost wrote into the poem that one of the cups fell off the table at the Ritz, but I thought that was too much. But obviously the Dresden in the Ritz Hotel, beautiful china, and the broken Dresden, that's been bombed. So I do link those things in.
But for me it really hit me hard was, the old man sitting and the normality of it, and it's going to happen again. That the civilians will always be the victims of war.
Yes. Yes. That's the horror. I was watching the Armenian and Azerbaijani war, which is going on right now, and there has been a settlement where, in fact, the people who had to move out of a certain area, which I think they occupied illegally, if I understand the politics of it, but there was a Russian settlement, and they had to go back. They burnt their houses so that the other population wouldn't have the benefit of the house. But the horror of the little child who's 9 years old, who understands nothing of this, is just caught in the middle. Also, the interesting thing about the Aleppo poem is just that it's a radical, I would say, protest. So in his quiet way, he's giving the middle finger to President Assad and basically saying, screw you.
Yes.
I'll play my gramophone, I'll listen to, and I'll smoke my favorite pipe, and and we'll carry on.
That's almost like the
and then the children in the street go, oh.
Life is normal.
Life is normal. Of course, the music carried better because the windows were blown out.
Oh, no. But I must say, these are some of the best poems I've read in a long time, because it doesn't bring judgment. It's not political poems. It's very personalized poems. It doesn't say all war is bad or things like that. It's about the victims.
Yes, that's right. So I try to confront difficult questions, not in a neutral way, because I'm obviously a pacifist, that one can see from the poems. But they're no political speeches. They're just descriptions of the situation. And then the readers are so very intelligent. You don't really have to over-explain ever. And they will pick up on the themes.
Yes.
This is what I find.
Okay, I just want one last question. Why did you, with the statues, even with the pictures that accompany it, you never show the faces? It's always from the back. Was it just the initial, of the In Chariots of Fire? Of the bombers.
So to say, in my collections, my poetry collections, and there's a new one coming out in the new year.
Oh, can't wait.
They are all very, very. You've got one there. It's full of pictures. You can see. Well, that particular page hasn't got. But there's multiple. So the image of the bomber command was that there's this busy road, the Piccadilly, which runs up. The Duke of Wellington is absolutely the greatest commander of the British that ever they had, perhaps outside Nelson, and he's just next door to them, and he's on his horse, but he's pointed away from them, and when you go up the Piccadilly, you see this command, but it's pointed away from the busy road, and it's pointed out into the park where there are far less people, and they're standing in a circle, as if almost a defensive position, and I speak about in the poem where the Duke of Wellington is pointed away, and Bomber Harris takes no blame. So everything's pointed away, but they looking out. And actually, there's a little line also from William Blake's poem, where it says they're looking out over the green fields.
So
that's also in the poem. So there's that link. But the whole idea is of this incredible. In fact, Bomber Harris's statue was only put up about 20 years ago. It's at the Royal Air Force Church on the embankment. So even Churchill didn't recognize the role of the Bomber Command in his speech after the war, everyone was not willing to talk about it. Because it is horrible, you know.
Yeah.
But it's horrible the other way too. Obviously, the Blitz was incredibly difficult. And when I'm in London, I often see plaques, and you'll see an old Georgian building or something, and then in between suddenly
nothing.
There's a new modern building, and you see the plaque. That's where a bomb fell.
Sure.
Yeah.
Amazing. But I must say congratulations on winning, or second running up, and then the new poetry book coming out next year.
Thanks very much, Wolfgang.
And hopefully we're going to have a big party for that one.
We will. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you for Elmin from the George Library for making this possible.